The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the guests appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of 8 News Now or Nexstar Media Group.
All right, we'll say welcome back to Alan after some well-deserved time off over the holidays. Glad that you were back with us, and Happy New Year. Yeah, a little bit belated. Thank you both for coming in. Let's talk a little bit about clearly the big topic across the country is with the shutdown and the funding hinging on the border wall. Where are we at? Is any kind of a deal likely anytime soon?
We talked about it last week. It's not going to happen. They're not going to fund a border wall. Congress is not going to fund that. And this is a manufactured crisis by Donald Trump. This is something that is his pet project for his base. And frankly, you know, there was reports this week he was stomping his feet and pounding his fists on the desk. He can stomp and pound all he wants. It's not going to happen. And so at the end of the day, he's putting federal workers at risk. They're not getting their paychecks. Now we're talking about food stamps not getting divvied up. We're talking about national parks being ruined. There's so much at stake here. And we need to quit playing games. This is not a game, and we need to end the shutdown and move forward. What we actually need to be focused on is real comprehensive immigration reform. That's what they should be focused on, not a border wall.
Do you see any deal in sight?
You know, if the president initiates executive action and declares a national emergency, which he should and he will, something will get done. There'll be lawsuits that'll go on, but in the end, the president will win his point. The president has given in on every single solitary point to the Democrats, to Schumer and Pelosi, and they have accepted everything he said except for that one part of the so-called wall, fence, whatever you want to call it. There are reasons that he wants that up. Walls are effective, and as we've talked about in this show before, you're not going to have a wall from the Pacific Ocean to the Gulf of Mexico. That's not going to happen. But you need a wall in a lot of those areas, and you need other aspects, electronic surveillance, drones, Border Patrol agents, and whatever. They should be giving this to him. The reason they're not is because he's Donald Trump. In 06, Chuck Schumer and most of the liberal Democrats, like Hillary Clinton, Barbara Boxer, and Dianne Feinstein, all voted for fencing and all of that, saying we needed to reinforce the border. There's a security problem at the border. That was 06. That was 06. Now, of course, because it's Donald Trump and they want to make him seem as impotent as possible so they can defeat him in 2020, they'll do everything they can to oppose him. The chuckle that I got out of the whole thing was the fact that they said, we'll reopen the government and then we'll talk about it. And so, you know, there's big dispute about whether or not he stomped out or whether he slammed the table. I don't blame him for going out and saying bye-bye, by the way. He did the right thing. But when he said basically, all right, if I give you, we reopen the government, I give you everything, within 30 days, will you go ahead and fund the comprehensive, the immigration security as I requested, which actually all had come from the Border Patrol. All of that had come from Border Patrol. And they're the experts who know about it, not all the other pundits. And Nancy Pelosi said, no, we're not going to do it. And that's when he got up and he said, bye-bye, and he walked out. I don't blame him for doing it at all. There have been problems at the border with people crossing the border and not being properly vetted. At one time, there were men who came over, and now because of families coming in more than before, the housing issue is big time, and they need money for that. So there are a lot of reasons that they've got to be able to rethink what's going on. You and I agree, we've talked about before, on comprehensive immigration reform, on every which way. We've got to absolutely look at it. But this is part of the issue. And if you look at the money that he's asking for this whole thing, it's but an absolute, complete, total sliver in the entire federal budget. I mean, almost non-existent.
Alan does bring up the point of some of the Democratic senators did support bills that would have included funding to build barriers along the southern border. Has an appetite changed? Is it just because it's Donald Trump that maybe the appetite has changed, or the attitude? Do you believe?
Look, I don't always agree with all Democrats, first of all. Second of all, I've never supported a border wall. I never will support a border wall. I've been very consistent on this issue. This is another racist policy by Donald Trump to excite the base. That's all it is. He made a campaign promise to his folks when he ran for president to say, I'm going to put up a wall. And that sounds real great until you start putting up a wall or you start putting up a fence or whatever version of it he wants to say it is today, because it keeps changing over and over and over again. And at the end of the day, we've seen walls. They don't actually work. You look at various places around the world, walls don't work. That's not a real thing. And yes, do we need immigration reform? Absolutely. But the vast majority of people who are here, who stay here, are overstaying their visas. They're not coming through the border. So this nonsense that people are coming here and they're violent and committing crimes, this is more of the same from Donald Trump and the party that he belongs to. All they want to do is divide people. They want to pit one group of people, Latinos against black people, against white people. That's what they're trying to do with this policy. It's not a policy that's actually going to work. And again, it's a racist policy. Bottom line.
When you do not have, when the liberals don't have an argument, they use the word racism, and so I would expect you and the libs to use that because you don't have an argument. Number one. Number two, let's be very, very clear. According to the Border Patrol, the idea of people overstaying their visas, being the people who are here the longest as illegals, that is not true. That's a false narrative, number one. Number two, a false narrative. So, I mean, let's operate on the basis of what reality is. Reality is there are people coming over the border who are committing heinous crimes, and they have killed many people. The president talked about it in his address to the nation.
Yeah,
266,000 arrests of aliens with criminal records over the last 2 years, 100,000 assaults, 30,000 sex crimes, 4,000 violent killings, all of these, and we have the right and obligation. We have the right and obligation to protect the people of this country. Walls do work, otherwise Nancy Pelosi wouldn't have one in front of her home, number one. Number two, the wall in, not only that, I'm going to say something. I've been to Bethlehem in Israel. I was at Rachel's tomb, which is on the outskirts of Bethlehem. And it's interesting that the Jews go to Rachel's tomb to pray. And for years, they were attacked, shot, stabbed, beaten up, going to the tomb. Israel built many, many years ago a wall. I've been there. I've seen it 3 times. It's 20 feet tall or so. And when they started to build that, there are people around the world who are saying, oh, you can't do that, it's racist, it's exclusionary, it's keeping people, blah, 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 blah. Let me tell you something. Since they built that wall, not one Israeli or Jew has been attacked, let alone killed. Not one. Has the wall worked? It has worked. Absolutely. Have all walls worked elsewhere? They have. They have a wall, by the way, next to Gaza, between Israel and Gaza, and so they tried to dig tunnels under there, but they've got every one of those people coming through those tunnels. Walls around the world have worked. Otherwise, again, Nancy wouldn't have one in her home, and the people who are rich in this community wouldn't have one in their home.
So how do we wall off the airports, and how do we wall off our ports, our seaports, and how do we wall off the northern port? I mean, or the northern border. Nobody's talking about Canada. So why is it that it's only the southern border that you all are concerned about?
Because the people coming in,
they're Latinos. Because they're Latinos. That is what it is. Then why don't you want a northern wall?
Because the majority of people who are coming in who are dangerous are coming from the south. And it's not Latinos, by the way. You're using that because you've got nothing else. But the people who are coming in from the south, the southern border, are people from around the world of all backgrounds. Oh, yeah. You look for yourself and say.
But they're not coming into the northern border. It's just the southern border.
They're not coming in, and the numbers they are there.
Or the airports.
And by the way, let me just be very clear. I am for reinforcing border security in the north and the waterways as well, the Atlantic and the Pacific. Very much. I want to make sure it is all secure. We need a wall in the south, or close to that, most of it, but we need as much in the north and as much on the waterways. We've got to secure this. The obligation of government, first and foremost, is the security of the citizenry. And when the security is being threatened from without the president saying that we have to declare a national emergency, and I will make sure that this is accomplished. I believe that he will do it. Not just because he promised the American people, because I believe he loves this country, he loves the people here, and I believe he will absolutely fulfill his obligation to keep the people of this country safe.
Well, I want to get to some other topics if we can. Something we saw this week, the first 2 executive orders that Steve Sisolak put into play, the first one on the first day, actually, were to combat workplace discrimination, sexual assault, and harassment in the workplace. What changes do you expect to see? I know that we've, one of them talks about the privilege licenses. Yep. Gaming and marijuana companies need to provide their policies to the state for review and for file. Is this going to start taking a bite out of what's proven to be a problem?
Look, we have to do something. Nevada has had a problem. We've faced these issues in our governmental bodies. We've had 2 elected officials who have been accused of this. And we need to take this seriously. And I'm glad to see that Governor Sisolak and Attorney General Ford are taking it seriously. Attorney General Ford led the efforts during the last legislative session to hold one of his own members accountable for these actions. And so this is the next logical step in working on these things. I'm glad to see that they're bringing gaming in and the hotels in. I think we need to do more of that. I think we need to know what's going on the Strip and what's going on, especially if they have licenses from the state. I want to make sure that all licenses are included. It shouldn't just be, these privilege licenses. We need to make sure that this is a consistent thing and that we're not just targeting certain industries. Everybody should be subject to these things. So as somebody who has, dealt with these issues myself, I think this is a step in the right direction, and I'm glad that this is the first thing that they thought to do right out of the gate, because they need to address it.
With the talk about education as one of the big things, talking about different financing and a lot of other issues coming up, were you surprised to see that this was perhaps before the legislature meets the first thing that the governor wanted to tackle? No, because I agree with some of the things you said, absolutely, and the fact that Aaron Ford, a new Attorney General, is leading this is fine. I have a couple of issues because he had opportunities to deal with Mark Menendo long before he actually did, years and years before.
All did.
Well, he did in particular. He is, I don't care about they, he is the Attorney General. He is the one who did not deal with it effectively initially. Now, you're absolutely right. Eventually he did, but the issue I have, and I know you have this too, is that they never released any information about the investigation that was done into Mark Menendo, which I think they should still be releasing today, quite frankly. Having said that, listen, some of that's in the past. I'm hoping that moving forward that that he is more on top of it and more transparent with the public, with whatever it is that they happen to find out. And again, I'm looking at whatever sides the aisle, whoever the people are. As far as the policies, it's interestingly enough, this is a policy, when you look at gaming, that Becky Harris is the chair, had been working on, codified at least in the executive order, and then she was replaced. Interesting there, but this seemed to be moving the ball for her in a sense that it got the policy out there and moving.
Yeah, and
whether or not she was going to be there to implement it.
I'm glad that she did that. I think there's got to be more that's done. I think this is the very beginning of this. This is just the tip of the iceberg. And so if they're going to take this seriously, they really do have to do, a full investigation, a full audit, and make sure that these policies are being implemented all across the state. Not just in state, bodies, but also in different industries. And I'm really glad to see that they have victims' rights advocates and people who are professionals who understand sexual assault and sexual violence and harassment so that they can be a part of this process and really identify where there are holes. So I'm hopeful that this is a serious committee. I think it is. And I'm hopeful that we'll see changes down the road and that they'll report back on what they find.
Well, let's look at a local race and a recall attempt on Steve Soroka on the Las Vegas City Council. I know that Victoria Seaman perhaps is prepared to throw her name in the ring were that to happen. With the background of the recalls that we saw just not very long ago, do you think there's an appetite for the legislature, I'll start with you, Alan, to put some perhaps new rules in place or change the process?
Part of me hopes that they don't trying to change the process, but I also understand that there has been somewhat of an abuse of the process. We've certainly found that out with the former lieutenant governor and his efforts to recall.
Not lieutenant governor. He never actually won. We beat him before that.
You're right. Thank God. Yeah, you're right. A state senator. You're correct on that. But he never got the point of recalling the 3 women that he was trying to recall, which I never understood at all. Again, I've said it many times on the show, said a lot of times elsewhere, you don't like somebody, vote them out of office. If there is a criminal act that someone has committed, a criminal act, that is different. And you go ahead and you can try to impeach someone or recall them based on that. But because you don't agree with someone, then the next election time, that's what elections are all about. Get them out of there. I'm not a big fan of Steve Soroka and a lot of things he's done. But again, he got elected, you don't like him, next time you turn around and you get him out of there. I just think that these recalls are more than anything a distraction. I really do. And again, it's not, I don't agree with him. But the point is, I still think it's a distraction, and time could better be spent focusing on some of the important issues and coalescing people who disagree with him. And they're not going to coalesce people who disagree with him, I don't think, by trying to get a recall.
That would be, what, 4, if it's, this would be the 4th attempt, I guess, for the fourth person in about a year's time. Yeah. Is it time for the legislature to take a closer look at this?
Absolutely. I mean, it's an abuse of the rules, I think, and they're not. That is not what these are intended for. Alan is exactly right. Look, there's a lot of people that I don't like in government. There's a lot of people I'd love to recall every single day. But I'm not doing that because it's not the way our government works. Now, we have the process in place as a fail-safe. So if somebody does something egregious, we can remove them from office. And we've done that before. But in this situation with Soroka, just because you don't like his views does not mean you get to remove him from office. And the people behind this recall attempt are similar people to the recall attempt last time. And it failed the first time, and it's going to fail the second time, I hope, because it's an abuse of the system.
You know, what's a problem with this also is that if it does fail, and it is certainly, I think, bound to fail, and if it does fail, this does not speak well of the people who have brought this about. I mean, it's not going to look good to them. So I think you have to think about what you're doing before you take political action. And if you are going to succeed, then you go for it. But if you don't know, you're not going to succeed, don't go for it, because it's not going to make you look very good.
Just in the theme of CES being in town, I have to ask, they get a little bit less political, but a lot of automation. We continue to see more and more automated things that are happening, tasks, robots. Here in Las Vegas, we are starting to see robots doing some of the jobs that people did or do still. Are we starting to give in to the robot revolution? Is it time? Are you concerned? What do you think?
Look, robots driving cars actually scares the hell out of me. I'm not going to lie. But at the same time, so do Las Vegas drivers. And at the end of the day, I do think technology is more and more a part of our lives. I mean, every single bit of our lives is pretty much ruled by technology now. But what we need to make sure that's not happening is that jobs that are being created for real people are not being taken away from them just because automation is cheaper and easier. And so there has to be a balance there, and we have to strike that balance because workers matter, and having good jobs that pay well for people matter. And so, you know, we're already seeing a little bit of it, but I don't know if we're totally there yet just to turn it over to the robots.
Robot butler, I think at least one of the hotels, a robot security pod thing that drives around. I think there's like robot concierges as well. So you're starting to see these things here in Las Vegas.
Yeah, let me just say, I'm totally agreeing with you on the one thing. I'm totally flummoxed by this idea of driverless cars. I know they're testing them here in Phoenix and elsewhere. The idea, again, maybe I'm too old-fashioned. I think the idea of driverless cars is a weird concept. And if you get into an accident, who do you sue? I mean, do you sue the? The whole thing is just very, very strange to me, and I probably will never buy into it. And yes, I grew up watching the Jetsons on TV, where they had the little, the
Rosie the robot and the flying cars and all that.
And that's all cool. Maybe someday that will all happen. That's probably after my time, but it may all happen. The idea that technology is taking over and we are mechanizing more and more jobs is a reality. And yes, it's going to mean rightfully or wrongly, unfortunately, just how it is, people will be replaced. We know that in restaurants, where we've talked about this before in terms of minimum wage, where they've said, okay, fine, you want a minimum wage, and now you go in and you can order your burgers and everything else in a menu without talking to anyone. And they even have robots that can cook the burgers. I don't know how good they are, but I mean, but they cook the burgers and everything else. Eventually, most of this will be mechanized. That's just how it goes, and people will lose their jobs. And which means that people, when they need jobs, have got to initiate on their own training to be able to get to new jobs. And yeah, it's nice that schools exist here in Southern Nevada to be able to train people, to be able to become wise and how to be able to get into other jobs and learn it. But that's the technological revolution is here. That's why we all have our iPhones. And you know, you have an iWatch, I guess.
No, it's a Fitbit.
It's a Fitbit. It's a Fitbit. Because when I was growing up, Dick Tracy in the comic strips had a two-way wrist radio, and people would talk into it, and people would say, "That's cool, man. Maybe that'll happen someday." Now people got iWatches, and they talk into their phones and everything else. So all this is happening. The only thing I'm most concerned about, I'll be honest, are the driverless cars.
All right, the driverless cars versus the Las Vegas drivers.
Maybe they can find a way to deal with the traffic too. You know, when they have big conventions come to town.
Yeah. Oh, there we go. Maybe hey, we'll all agree that that's what we want to see the technology come in on. All right. Well, thank you both for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you.